Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Of course, if you are new here, I'm Jonathan Martins, and this series is all about turning Azure concepts into real-world hands-on cloud experience. So before we jump right in, be sure to hit the like, the subscribe, and tap the notification bell so you do not miss the next lab in this Azure journey. Today we're going to be looking at our lab 9, and yes, we've come this far. Today we're going to be deploying a Flask web application using Azure App Service. Previously, we've talked about Azure App Service, but today we're going to be working with Azure App Service alongside Cosmos DB Table API and Service Bus Topics. For those of us very familiar with AWS DynamoDB and SNS, this lab is pretty much the equivalent of that. As usual, our labs are very practical, and for this lab, we're going to show how to wire a real Flask application to real Azure services and then deploy it the Azure native way. Okay, so as usual, we always want to talk about our architecture. So this is our architecture diagram, so we have a good understanding of what we're going to be working on today. So we have our Flask web application here, which is going to be hosted on Azure App Service. Going to be pretty easy to do that. And then we're going to have our Cosmos DB table, API table, right? And of course, this is going to be acting like the DynamoDB for people very familiar with AWS. And we're going to be working with a service bus or service bus topic that will basically publish login notifications. So it's a very simple application. And here we have our email. So just to give you a good understanding of what we're going to do, or just to give you like, an idea. So we're going to be working with Service Bus, and for Azure, Service Bus does not email you directly. So yes, we have the email icon here, but Service Bus doesn't email you directly. Messages actually land inside a topic subscription, which I will show you. And in the future labs, I'm going to connect like logic apps of Azure function that's going to turn those topic messages into real email notifications. So for this lab, it's not going to be going directly to our email, but we're going to see it in the topic subscriptions, and then we can now integrate with other Azure services like I mentioned, like the Azure function or logic app, to actually turn those topic messages into real email notifications. Okay. So just to give you a good idea, so imagine, of course, you're working with a small startup, and then we're trying to build an internal login dashboard, right? So of course we need a web interface, maybe a place to store users, and a system to actually track logins, right? People that log into the platform or users that log into the platform. So instead of us managing the servers manually, so we can actually use like the app service for hosting this small application, and then we can use our Cosmos DB table API to actually store the users, basically for user storage. And then we can use the service bus topics for sending login events, right? And then later in the future, we can actually connect like the logic app or functions to actually send the emails, to trigger workflows, or to even write audit logs, right? So with this, the pattern is very clean, it's event driven, and this is widely actually used in real world or real cloud applications. Okay, so yes, so let's dive right into our labs for today. So just walk through with me. Okay, so we're going to kick off by creating a resource group, so it's always easier to clean up. So we can go to our resource group. So we can just call this lab 9 resource group. Okay, so we can go to resource group. So this is our resource group. So next we want to actually create a Cosmos DB, right? So we can search for Cosmos DB. All right, so we want to create the Cosmos DB for table. So be sure that you're creating the Cosmos DB for table, not for NoSQL, right? Because we're going to be working with tables. So yes, this is a learning environment. So sure, we have our resource group already created. We can call this lab 9 Cosmos account. So this is good. So can do Canada Central, and yes, we can ride along to create this. So this might take a few minutes to create, but when we're done with this, we want to make sure that we create our table. Then we can now create the, like a test user on the table. Okay, refresh this. Okay, perfect. So our Cosmos DB account is done creating, so we want to create our table. So we can just go to Data Explorer, and then we can see the new table here. And then pretty easy, we just have to create a very simple table. I'll call this my table, and this is good. This isn't supposed to take too long. Okay, so we have our table created here, just called my table. So now we can actually add a user to this table. So we can just add entity, and yes, so we have like the partition key, we have the row key, so we can just like give the partition key maybe a name. We can call this username, and for our row key, which is going to be like a unique identifier for that particular user that we're creating, so I can call this Dej, and I can add other properties like the email. So I can add my email, I can add like a password, and I can add it. So I mean, for the sake of this lab, the password is being exposed, but of course when you're building a real application, you want to use maybe bcrypt to actually encrypt like your password before saving it to the database. Very important. So take note for this, so you don't just put your password plainly like that in the database, but this is just happening for the sake of the lab. And again, I think you should also take our time to study a bit about partition key and the purpose of partition, which is more or less like grouping. So it is used to group like different kinds of data in the database. So just do a bit of research about partition key. Okay, so this user that we're going to create is going to be used for logging in the Flask application when we create our application. So we've added the user here, and then we can move on to create our service bus, right, which is equivalent to the SNS topic for AWS. So I have my service bus here, which I've created previously, and okay, yes, I can give the service bus a name. So I can call this lab 9 service bus same location and pricing tier, we can go with the standard, right? So if we're going to use the basic, for the basic, we might not be able to get access to be able to use like the topics for service bus, but we are going to be using the standard, so we're able to use the topics for service bus. So this is it. So I can review and create, and I can create the service bus, which is basically a message broker, right? It shouldn't take so long to create. Okay, so now we've created our service bus, right? So what we want to do now is we basically want to create a topic. So we can easily create a topic here, or you can check your entities and you can see the topic here. So if we had created the one for basic, we wouldn't be able to have access to topics. We'll just have access to just queues. But now we need access to topics. So that is why we are going with the basic, or maybe you can go with the premium, whatever the case may be. So I can create a topic and I can just call this my topic. And then when I create a topic, I can go right into my topic, and then I can also create a subscription. So I can just call this, let's say, login subscription. So we can leave the default data there. So good. So we have our service bus, we've created our topic, and then we have our subscription. Okay. So next we want to look at our Flask application. So the Flask application is not really a problem because I have created like the entire Flask application, a very basic application that just helps us to log in, right? So we have like the index, which gives us like the field for username and password, and we have the input field for username and password, and then the button to actually log in. So what this application does is that it's like a login application. Basically, you log in and then it checks the database. If the user is eligible to log in, sorry, and then the user can get access to the system. But if the user is not eligible to log in, it tells you, oh, this is invalid username and password, right? And again, we have like a connection string and, for the service bus and table. Please do not do this in the real world application. You want to make sure that you have your config, or you have the key vault where you can store like this data. Okay, for the purpose of this lab, and because we're running with a very simple application, that is why I am doing this. All right, so you can go directly to the GitHub, you can clone this, and then you're going to get access to this simple application. So for now, we can just go ahead to create our app service plans, and we can create a Linux plan. So I can use the same resource group, and I can call this plan, and with this I could go use the free or maybe the basic, but that's very okay. And yes, I can create a plan. So it's free. So when we create a plan, the next thing we want to do, okay, this is done. Interesting. So we want to create the app service, because the app service is going to use the app service plan. So we can create the web app, and of course the same resource group, and then we can just call our app service lab 9. We can call this Flask application. Okay, and then we're going to be publishing this because we have the code, and then we are using Python for this. Okay, and with our plan, we don't want to create a new plan, we want to create the plan that we have. So let me refresh this to see if we can get access to that plan. Okay, yeah, so we have access to the plan now, so we can use the same thing. Nope. So we have web 9, lab 9. So Flask application, we are using the same resource group to be sure. Okay, and then we can go further. So we can connect this to, oh, okay. So my app service plan is using the free, so I can move to the basic so that we are able to get access, or to integrate it with our GitHub account or connect it to our GitHub account. So what I can do is that I can go back to my app service plan, and I can, just copy this. I can delete this plan. It's not supposed to take so long. Okay, good. And then I can create a new one, and I can change this to a basic plan, a B1, right? And yes, still the same Linux plan. Okay. So yes, so we have our Linux plan. So now we can go back to our app service, and okay, so we can name this like we did before, lab 9 Flask application. And yes, so we were using Python 3.10 or 3.10, and yes, this is the plan. We're not using B1. And if we go to our deployment, so now we can allow for continuous deployment, where anytime we make a push to the repository or we change something in the repository, it's going to deploy automatically, continuous deployment. So we can actually select the organization we want, which is my GitHub account, and I'm going to link it with my repository, and I'm using the main branch. Okay, so I can go to review and create. Okay, so I can create this. Okay. It's almost done. Okay, and now that we're done, so now, okay. All right, so we have our web app, deployed and everything, but now there might be a challenge, so we might have to go to our configuration. So so we have our application structure here. We have the static folder, the templates that has the HTML files, and then we have the application.py. So in this case, Azure App Service is going to require an explicit startup command so that it can correctly locate the Flask app when your code is inside the app folder. So for example, we have the application.py inside the app folder. So now we want to we want to specify in a startup command that, okay, we are going to be using the application the py file. So yes, so our Flask app is going to be calling okay, the app, which is using app, and then we're going to be specifying the application.py file. So I already have the command in the repo, so I can just go to my readme, and okay, so I have this here. So I can copy this, right, just to specify that we're using the application .py file. So I have this. I can just refresh, and if possible, yeah, if you want, optionally, you can actually just restart your application, and then we could check, right? So just to see if the application is running or it's running successfully. So we can check just to make sure that it's running successfully. So we can check the logs while it's still loading. So if there are any issues, we can be able to debug and know where the problem is coming from. Let me check my deployment center. Just to see if we have any deployment. Okay, this is still pending. Okay, this is in progress. Oh, of course. It's still deploying, so this is still in progress, okay? So this might not run soon. So let's be sure that this is done first of all. About done deploying, the Azure web app. And once that is done, we're going to see it here that is done. So if it fails or it succeeds, we're going to see it here. And yes, we can, continue running it. So this should take a few minutes. Okay. Okay, so what is the problem? So this has failed. My application failed to deploy. So it failed to deploy. So what can happen is I can come to okay, this is correct. Okay. Okay. So I'm suspecting this is failing because we had, let me see. Okay. Okay, deployment field package deployment using deploy field. Okay. Okay. So let's try and create a new one. Okay, it's done building. So let me cancel these two. Okay, so we want to log into Azure. So it's deploying to Azure Web App right now. So I'm suspecting it's failing because this is a previous workflow, and I guess we have to create a new workflow for this. So this is an old workflow. So if it fails this time, we just have to create a new workflow. Okay, so if this fails, okay, great. So it's gonna fail. So what we can do is that we can delete this web app, right? Of course, we're going to delete this web app. Oh, we deleted our plan alongside. So we're going to create a new plan. So what I can do is that I can come here and I'm going to delete that. Okay. And then I'm just going to make a push again. Okay, so I can just quickly delete this since we're not going to be using it. Okay. So I want to delete this as well. Oops. Okay. Okay, great. So now I want to reload this to be sure that we do not have that. Okay, great. So we do not have that. So now what I want to do is that I want to create like the service plan again. And then we have our lab 9 plan. So as mentioned, we're using the basic. Okay, so we can now go back to create the app service. So we can create the app service and then we can call this lab 9 Flask application, and then by using code, this is our plan, and we can enable this. Okay. Okay, this is okay. Let me confirm. Okay. All right. So this is going to create its own workflow. So initially I had a previous workflow on that, as you've seen, and then it was failing, of course. Okay, so we're done. So we can go to our deployment center. So I can check this. Okay, it's connected. So I can reload this. And yes, so it has created its own workflow right here as we've seen, which ought to have happened. But I had created that before and I didn't delete it. So it's going to, log in and then deploy our application to Azure, right? So this is it. So it's in progress. And this would definitely work. So yes, so we can go to our configuration. Yes, okay. We have this still here. We can go to our deployment center. So we can wait a few minutes and this should be done. So just trying to make sure that we have our application fully deployed, and then we can, move on to, configuring like manage identity access. Pretty much linking our application to Service Bus as well as to Cosmos DB. Okay, perfect. So this is done. So we can see that initially the problem was I had done this previously and I did not delete the workflow that it generated initially. But anyways, yes, so before we carry on, so we can go to our Cosmos DB, and then we could go copy the connection string and put it right into application. So this is my primary connection string. So you need an env file, right, to put this. For me, I'm just putting it here for the purpose of this. So I can connect, I can put this here. And then I can go to my service bus and then do the same. I can go to shared access policies and then I can copy my primary connection string, this one, and I can come here, paste this here. Okay, and then what I want to do is just to push. Oh no, before we push, we want to pull, because now we have, the workflow added. So I can do git pull. Exactly. So we could do that again. We could commit again. We could push, and then this is already up to date. Okay. I think I have to put this again. So then I need to go back to my Cosmos DB, copy, go to connection strings, and then open my connection string. Okay, just to be sure. What is the challenge? Okay. So it's causing problems because, so let me go back, because it can't find, so let me go to, it can find the primary string in my what's it called, in code. So for the purpose of this lab, just to, let me change my visibility to private, and I can go back. I mean, it's a quick fix. Because this is a live lab. So let me clear this. Right, so I've been able to make that push, and because my repository is private, right? So now that I've made the push, I can check. You can see this is running, so automatically the workflow will run when I make the push to main. Okay, and yes, just to carry on, so what we want to do is that we want to enable manage identity, right? So for us to be able to enable manage identity, we need to go back to our Flask application. So I can go back to the Flask application, which is our app services, and we could check for identity under settings, and then we could just turn this on and then save, right? So we're going to see like the object principal ID, right? So this is it. And what we can do now is that we can go to Cosmos DB, and Cosmos DB, we can basically just go to IAM, and then we can add role assignment. So we could just find Cosmos DB account reader. So we have Cosmos DB account reader here, and then I can select the app service, select my application, and then we can do the same for service bus. So we can go to service bus just to make sure that we can, so we can go to IAM, and we can add role assignment. And in adding a role assignment, we can just go to, we can search for Azure Service Bus data sender, Service Bus data sender, okay, and assign to manage identity, and then we can look for our Flask application, right, and then could review and assign. Okay, so now this is it. So if we go back to our app service, so we have our app service here, and okay, we can check our identity, we can check for user assigned. Let me refresh this. System assigned. Okay, so yeah, we want to check what Azure role assignments, right? So we've been able to assign the Cosmos DB account reader role and the Azure Service Bus data center. So with this, we can actually, connect to it, and just to test that this works, we can go back to, our overview, and then go to the URL. So of course we can go back to our logs and then view the log stream. We also want to be sure that this is successful. So this is good, it deployed successfully. So we'll just wait for our application. Okay. So this runs successfully, but we need our application to show, so we can check our stack settings. Oh, we do not have our configuration here in our stack settings, so we copied that previously, so we can go back to we can copy this and then have our startup command, so it knows that okay, we're actually going to be using the application.py. So I can apply this, right? And so if I apply that, I can come and then I can refresh and I can restart the application again. Okay, so now I can reload this and I can go to my logs and view the log stream. This might take a while, but okay. Okay, so yes, so this is the application. Our application is up and running. Yeah, and yeah, so that could be like a bit of a hassle in terms of like deploying the application, and that's why I'm showing this live, that these things they happen, but you just have to find a way to debug it and then make sure everything resolves. So now, just to make sure that this works, so remember that we have our username which we created, which was Dej, and I use Dej12345 as my password. So let's try to log in. And yes, of course, you can see that this works. So if I try to use something incorrect, let's say a wrong password, it tells me invalid username and password. So just to be sure, like the way we have on our diagram, right, we have our Flask application, which needs to connect with the MongoDB to check if the user actually exists or the user is allowed to actually log into the application. And if the user is permitted to log in, or if their login details works, what happens is that we are going to send a message or publish a message, right? So now we can actually go to Service Bus to check the subscription if we have any messages published. Okay, so I can go to our topics, right? And in our topic, and I can see that we have the subscriptions in our entities, and yes, one message count. So if I try to log in again correctly and I put in the correct details and I log in, so this should be able to increase if I refresh to 2 message counts basically. So that's pretty much it. So again, with okay, so let me see. Sorry, this is a bit slow. This is just a bit slow. But anyways, so what you just have to do is that once yours works and you've been able to deploy these and successfully, log in, right, and it shows the congratulatory message, yes, and it works. That's pretty much it. So when you're done, do not forget, as usual, we have to try to delete our resources, and then delete our resources, to make it very easy. That's why we're using just a single resource group. You can paste that here and it's going to put up the delete confirmation to delete. So it deletes all the resources, the app service, Cosmos DB service bus, access key, and everything else that was created for this lab. So, and yes, that's the wrap up for our lab 9, where we are, deploying Flask app with Azure, Cosmos DB, and service bus topics. Not to take too much of our time because I already did. Just remember that today we learned how to build a real Flask web application, not necessarily, but just a very basic application, so we can actually deploy it, and we can authenticate user against like Cosmos DB table API. So you can do that in your application. You can publish like login events to service bus topic, and then we can deploy like the app cleanly using GitHub. Yes, that's pretty much it. And by now, I'm sure you have a good understanding of why service bus doesn't send email by itself. Not a good understanding, but you could see that service bus doesn't send email. So what we have to do in our future lab is that we have to connect it with other services, right, to be able to send that to our email. Okay, so if this video has helped you understand how Azure services fit together in real application, please make sure to like this video, subscribe, and share this with a friend learning Azure. Next lab, we're going to extend, this architecture and then do a lot more with our web application as well as service bus. Thank you. I'm Jonathan Martins, and this is the Azure Cloud Lab series, and I'm going to see you in the next lab.